On this week's episode of the Autohaus podcast,
I really enjoy being an underdog. I don't want like the cheat that's going to get me to the next level. So like when the opportunity came to race like your Toyota Corolla against a Ferrari, I was like, F yeah.
This is the Autohaus podcast. I have another special guest. Could you say your name and give yourself a short introduction?
Yeah, my name's Colin Frost, and my life has been ruined by Corollas, and it continues to happen. So I think I'm here for some emotional support.
Oh, man, that's a good segue. I found a Reddit thread that you sold that green Levin and traded it for that FD RX-7. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. That car was like a long-term build, and it was a really cool car. Kind of did everything I expected out to do, and then just over the course of building it, I got older, and my interests in Corollas kind of changed from being like super track focused to being more like, you know, wanting something I could take to the track once in a blue moon, but get a lot of cruise time with. So at the time, I had acquired a second Corolla, like a hatchback, and put that one up for sale, and a trade offer came in from a guy who is a buddy now. He's actually from Maryland. He traded his FD for the Corolla, and we were both pretty stoked on the deal.
So rewinding a little bit, your start into the AE86 chassis, how did that happen for you?
Sure. So that was, I think, probably around 2003 or so. And it kind of started because I've always been, into cars from, when you're a kid and you play Need for Speed all the way up to when you're getting to that age where you're starting to research, like, on my working at a movie theater budget, what kind of car can I get? And, I knew I wanted to try and see what it's like out at the racetrack, some of the open track days, and not having a big budget. I just found that, old Nissans and old Toyotas seemed to be a good option. And the E86 was a standout. And that was from like super old Club 4AG days where, you had a fun engine and it was rear wheel drive and had a manual transmission, and it sort of checked all the boxes. It wasn't fast, but it was cool. And that's sort of how I came into it, was just kind of poking around early car internet and thinking this is the right mix for the budget that I have.
Digging back through the internet, I saw you had a stint in Formula D at one point.
I did, yeah. I did a lot of weird stuff with cars. They seem to always monopolize my time. So let's see. My first track day is probably around that time when I got my first Corolla. My first Corolla was, I used to do this thing. I still do it sometimes. I actually did it this morning, where I'll drive around aimlessly combing neighborhoods to see any broken down, dumpy cars that I could buy. And like at the time, this is like when you could still find A86s around. I was driving through like a small town in Orange County called Villa Park up in their hills, and I found a red Zenke hatchback that was in somebody's side yard, and he was using it to store cement mix. And with 6-7 months of persistence, he finally sold me the car for $500. And I put a battery in it and drove it home. And I took that out to California Speedway, then a parking lot event with an organization called US Drift in 03-ish, something around there. And I was pretty hooked on drifting there, and just sort of set my sights high and switched over when doing competition to an S13 chassis, and then kind of bopped my way around until I got that FD license and did a few rounds of that and got me and my 250 horsepower ass kicked, but had like a good time and kind of accomplished some goals. And yeah, that's sort of what I did. I got some cool opportunities to drive for Lexus and TRD, take some sideways pictures for some of their promotional materials, and did a short stint of driving with Mazda with some Miatas that they had. Very cool. Wouldn't trade it for the world, but sort of got to a point where, and you're competing at something like that. And I stepped back and I was like, okay, if I spend all my time on this, that's, draining me of what little money I have, or I focus on a career, which one's going to get me spending more time with cars? And I thought, I'll go focus on a career and build that up and be able to buy cars and enjoy them, where I can afford and have time. And that sort of scoots me along to where I was today.
I'm more interested in finding out more about, so 03 Formula D, and you had the opportunity to drive for Lexus and Toyota, and you had a stint with Mazda. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean the in FD I was a privateer, so I had like a really pirate ship S13 that me and some buddies had kind of together and did. That was in '08, I think. And then I did some driving with TRD. I got to drive. They built a really cool X Runner that was like supercharged, had ITBs. It was a really badass build. And they needed some, drift shots for some magazines. So I was lucky enough to drive for them with that, just through some connections I had made. And the same for when they launched the ISF up at Laguna Seca. That was cool. And then the Mazda program was one that they ran with a couple different tire companies, and they had these super sick. They're NC Miatas, which everyone hates, but I kind of like NCs, and it's probably because of this experience. But one piece carbon front and carbon everything else. They're super light. They ran Cosworth NZR 2.3, like super peaky, fun engines that were bad for drift competition, but really fun to drive. And that, yeah, I think I probably stopped doing that around 2012-ish, and just sort of started focusing on what I do, like air quotes, and say my more adult stuff. But yeah, that's sort of a little bit of my driving path that got me to get to have some fun over the years.
It sounds like even today you're still doing some media work that's related to driving. Is that right?
Yeah, anytime I can get in a car and kind of drop the clutch and drive around like a psycho, it's fun. Over the years, I've just kind of been doing it so long. I've made some good friends that give me really fun opportunities. Like I started the company Big Country Labs 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And I'm not involved anymore. I sold it last year so I could focus on family time. But that was really cool because I got to hook up with some friends over at like Hoonigan. That we did a daily transmission episode over there and had some fun over in their little yard. And I got to do an episode of Driving Line, the driver battle, where my good buddy Dave, who has a Ferrari 348, went up to Willow Springs at Streets of Willow, and we did sort of a time attack thing, my Corolla versus his Ferrari, which is very close. Like I was very proud that it was even close. But it was a lot of fun. That was actually the first time shaking that car down was out at that Willow Springs event. So with the lap times we got pretty darn close to that Ferrari, and I wish I could take a second crack at it. So I think I might be able to have them.
One of the more recent media events that I think I really like saw your car in the spotlight was that commercial you guys did for Toyota.
Oh
I think
yeah,
like Toyota Latino.
yeah.
I'll kind of give you some background. So, not too long ago, I was working out of my home garage, running the
Mhm.
Autohaus, and regularly, we both, our mutual friend Jack Mob, Jacob
Oh yeah.
Geoffrey, yeah,
He's an angel, isn't he?
yeah.
He's an angel. The guy, God opened the heaven and just dropped him down. We just got a little Jacob.
I tell people all the time, in your lifetime, you will meet one Jacob.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, he's the best.
And I remember him telling me, man, we had to rush it out because he was like, dude, I got this opportunity to film this commercial, but I got to drive to SoCal tomorrow. Can you help me with my car? And I was like, Jesus. Yeah, it was cool to see like you guys. I mean, for me, it was like cool to see Jacob like kind of hit the big time, and then to see you in that commercial. So, talk about that experience.
That's really cool. That was with it was put together for Toyota as a spot where they were looking to uncover a lot of kind of Corolla culture. It was something that they didn't really know about going into it. It was done through their ad agency called MeToo, MITU, and a guy named Ambrosio Ballone, who's like a really talented creative, like reached out. He's like, "Hey, you're really involved with like Corolla community, right?" I was like, "Yeah. What do you want to hear?" So we yapped on the phone for a while, and he asked, "Can you get a few Corolla guys together?" I was like, "A few? Like, they don't really come in onesie twosies." So we kind of put the word out, and I mean, you're a part of it. That Corolla community is the best. I think it's part of why Corolla dudes can get really defensive over someone being shitty online and stuff like that, is that it's such a good group of dudes. So when we put the word out, Jacob messaged me, and he was so pumped up. He reached out to one of their production people, and the girl came back to me and she's like, "Dude, this guy's the shit. He's like super pumped on this. He's like lives and breathes Corollas." And that was my first intro to Jacob too. And I was like, "This kid's fucking awesome." But we got a bunch of guys together, the local Corolla guys, like Dennis and the gang all came out, and some for just for kind of doing donuts in the parking lot at a drive-in theater, and there's another couple segments we did over at a small kart track in Riverside, Adams Kart Track. And I met dudes I hadn't met before. Gary Fang, who's like a really rad guy. I just picked up a hood from him that last weekend, and it was like we never driven together before, but when there's another Corolla guy out there on the course, it's like you mesh together pretty well. So we all went and had fun, and got to go do clutch kicks behind a CTSV wagon with this giant metal arm hanging off the top, like, and a guy in a little X-wing fighter seat in the back spinning it around. It was a really cool experience, and being like a super Toyota nerd, it was a pretty proud moment for me too. And you couldn't ask for better guys to come out and support that thing getting put together, and a better representation of what Corolla guys at least in California are. And I know they're just as good everywhere else too.
One thing that kind of just dawned on me was that a lot of former motorsports drivers, such as yourself, many, many years later, still have these media contacts and media opportunities kind of pop up. And I know you do a fair amount, on social. I know we'll talk about, I think you guys have a podcast, but what I'm trying to figure out is like, how did this happen? Like, you kind of don't really force yourself into the spotlight, but, it seems like because of your past motorsports career, all these opportunities still, present themselves so many years later.
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for it. I've been lucky enough to make a lot of like really good friends over the years, and just kind of how like we're talking about Jacob. It's some folks, it's really easy to see who they are when you get to connect over your passion and you have like that common passion, and that's what keeps me here. Guys that I get to talk to and run into a couple times a year, I really genuinely like them as people, and we just kind of stay connected. And I think that's kind of what happens elsewhere too, just being ready for that kind of stuff. So sometimes you'll just pop into someone's head of that would be fun to do. Yeah, I don't know. Just having a lot of folks that you're friends with kind of has your name pop up here and there is as best as I could explain it. I don't try and go too overboard with reaching out all over the place and saying, "Hey, put me in front of your people." But when the opportunities do come up, it's always kind of feels more natural, and it's a good time.
I totally agree with that. And then in getting ready to do this podcast, I did a little bit of background research, and for some reason in my mind, I had it that your green Levin was F20 swapped, but
Oh no.
yeah, that's not the case at all. But when I found out that you had a 20 valve in there, I was like, okay, this guy's the real deal. So
Yeah, I'm kind of a diehard 4AG dude. Like I appreciate, all the people putting beams in their cars, and it makes all the sense in the world. Like I couldn't talk anybody out of it if they're like, I want to make 200 horsepower with the wheels. I'd be like, go for it. Put a beams in there. It's going to make a lot more sense than trying to build up a 4AG. But I think it's because part of it's, I really enjoy being an underdog. I don't want like the cheat that's going to get me to the next level. So like when the opportunity came to race like your Toyota Corolla against a Ferrari, I was like, F yeah, we're doing this. Like that would be a fun thing to try and tackle. I think the 4AG is all about that. It's even the guys that build them up and they put 5 or 10 grand into their engine and make 150 horsepower, and we all rejoice like that was a good idea. There's a certain badge of pride that comes with being 4AG powered, and it's not that you're not cool if you have an F20 or a beams. I think it's fine, but I like the pride of sticking with the original 4AG, even if I cheat a little bit and had a 8111 black top. My hatch right now has got a blue top 16 valve in it. It just matches the car. It feels good. Going through the RPMs is hard to replicate. F20s are cool, but God, I like having less power and doing more with it. It just feels like you're pulling off something special.
yeah, one quote in a recent Speed Hunters article that really resonated with me is that these NA cars, every 1,000 RPM brings us a different story. And I think that's really true with any variant of a 4A, whether it be, 20 valves, 7A, stroker, your base 3-rib 4AG. Like you said, that base 4A matches the car, so perfectly. Forget power, forget all of that. And then there's a certain sound and a smell from a 4A that you know for sure, right?
Yeah, pick it out anywhere. Even the carb 16 valve I had years and years ago still felt like a 4AG. I think it's part of what makes someone like Yuio special, who's like, he's a hero for so many guys, is that, you look at what he's doing, even though that's, one of the most badass 4AGs on the planet, he's able to do stuff with it that makes you step back and say, holy shit, and then go do a check wipe in the bathroom because you're shitting yourself over how good it is. You know what I mean? I think there's something so cool about that. Doing more with less is such a theme of 8086s, and it really exemplifies it when you're still 4A powered.
Talk about that no cigar license plate because I noticed you put it on your FD.
Yeah, it's from a Millen Collins song that I've always kind of connected with, and I'm just gonna pull up a lyric because it's really just about not worrying about whether you fit in, and you're just kind of saying F it, I'm gonna do me. I that feels very Corolla because it's a nonsensical thing to do. Like if you want to go faster on a racetrack, you should probably have more power or a car that's not from the 80s.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's sort of like we're deciding what cool is on our own terms, and that's something that you get like we've never talked before, but I could spend, I'm sure, like 3 hours at a Denny's with you, like joking around about Corolla stuff and having fun talking about it because we have this different definition of what's cool, and I know it's shared amongst everyone in that community. So that song called No Cigar kind of just, it feels like it exemplifies that sort of attitude. So that's always kind of something I've held close to the heart.
Mm.
And the phrase "close but no cigar."
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's based around. And I feel like that's, if you accomplish close but no cigar and you do it in a Corolla, like that's pretty badass. Like you still get your stripes for that one.
Do you have any engine swap plans for the current Corolla you have?
No, I'm like, that's like Mr. Stock. I'm like hunting down the last pieces of the stock intake snorkel so I can convert it all back to OEM. It's kind of my adult Corolla build.
Mm-hmm.
I started my 11 when I was, I don't know, 26 or something maybe. I'm 34 now, I think. And the 11 was very much, I wanted a car that was reliable enough to drive to the track and back just because I was tired of butts in the trailers. And, I wanted it to be light, and it was just barely over 2,000 pounds. I think it was like 2050, with a half tank of gas. And over the years, I got older and I just got annoyed with fiberglass. I don't know, pulling in and out of driveways, worrying about it too much, or driving on the freeway in Southern California, somebody just leaves a chair or a chain in the middle of the freeway, and I think, okay, this is immediately going to be decimated. Fender flares falling apart over the years. You just kind of go, that's something a little more durable. So though that was a really great car, and it was super reliable once it got sorted out, I wanted something that had a little more fit and finish.
Mm.
So this hatchback that I'm working on right now is all, metal fenders and all that jazz, and stock JDM bumpers, which isn't anything special, but it just felt like the right thing to do for me because I can leave it in the garage and I have a 2-year-old who can run around and slam against it and I don't have to worry about it falling apart. And it was the same thing with the 16 valve. It's just keep it stock, make it as simple as possible. I plan on staying stock ECU forever, eventually passing that crazy milestone of being California smog legal. But that's always a weird undoing process if the car's been enthusiast owned for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's full interior. I pulled everything out and did all the sound deadening on it and the big thick carpet. And now I'm just working through the last bits of the interior, so I have something that feels more like a resto mod project than a track car. And I've really enjoyed it. It feels more like a complete car and less like I'm worried about it falling apart when I drive it, which is a good plus.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more owners I talk to who have been with this chassis for a long time, the more they have either kind of doing what I'm doing, where it's like, I got this car 8 or 9 years ago and now I'm spending all this money to undo everything I did previously to get it.
I will burn in hell for all the interior I've thrown away over the years. Every hatch privacy cover that I just was like, yeah, who cares? Yeah, absolutely. Now it's like we all, do you know Ronnie?
Of
Ronnie?
course. Yeah.
Everyone's just
the chairman, right?
Yes, the chairman himself. You just got to aim for the Ronnie build. Like that's like the ultimate right there. You pop in, the car's got all this beautiful interior and stuff.
Yeah, except you got to keep your cars, not keep selling them and then buy another one and do the same thing over again, right?
Don't influence it. I feel like one of these days I'm going to be wealthy enough to buy like a true Ron car, and then I'm going to retire from ever touching Corollas and just work off his excellent work.
No, and then And then just like everyone else, you'll regret it and say like, ah, man, shouldn't have sold it. Now I want another one.
Absolutely. It's haunting, isn't it?
But yeah, as people who have been with this chassis for a long time, I see a lot more and more of this where it's either what you're doing, which is like, I'm going to do the adult, quote unquote Corolla build, which is like a majority street resto mod, but more on the restoration side.
Yeah.
And yeah, I see so much more of that now, which is completely opposite to, we're similar ages to like when we first started, where, like you said, like throw everything out, get it as light as possible.
Ugh, yes. Yeah. I think it's partially a sign of the times when they're just not available anymore. And you just get that one jackass who wants to post a pile of shit for 35 grand, and he only includes three pictures and none of the interior under the hood. And that's the market. Like that's kind of crazy. That it just switches me personally. I feel like I need to get into like a preservation mode. Partially where it's like you keep spares of the good stuff in your garage, but partially it's like, oh fuck, we screwed all these cars over. I've screwed over plenty myself and cut them up to put flares on them and all kinds of stuff. But now you go look at the market, you see what's for sale, and it doesn't look good. It's like big news on the Facebook groups when a halfway decent Corolla comes up for sale. And most of the ones I see changing hands are almost like closed sales. Like you have, a friend of a friend's like, hey, this guy's thinking about letting go of his car. It's going to be 12 grand or whatever it is. The ones that go up are just rough. So I feel like, I don't know, it feels good to be bringing them back to some former glory or better shape instead of kind of adding to the pile of half stripped and murdered cars.
I think the other side of that too is that because these cars are fetching such a high price, a lot of some of what I see in Northern California is that those who buy these cars at five-figure prices, they end up being locked away in a collection, and then they never get driven. They're never part of the community. We never see these cars again,
Yeah.
right? They just rot in somebody's garage, which I think is equally as terrible.
It's a bummer to see. We all kind of watch what happens at the market because you're curious. As an owner, I don't really have any plans to sell my car at all. And it kind of came on sale to me through some kind of a bit of sentimental value from a friend, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But the collector market seems to be, we have some folks who are like managers of collections, you know, buying cars because it's like, hey, let's hop in on the Japanese car market. I was just watching today. It was nuts, man. I had two tabs open on Chrome for Bring a Trailer, and one had a Ferrari 575 Maranello, which is beautiful, long nose V12, very like classic quintessential Ferrari, and an NSX. And it was a late model NSX, with the fixed headlights and that stuff. And it was yellow, which I don't mind yellow cars, but most people do. And they were neck and neck on price. They're both sitting at like 80 grand. I was like, what the hell's going on with the world? There's a freaking NSX. Like this used to be normal-ish, acquirable somewhere in the high 20s or low 30s. And then as the auctions both closed up, the Ferrari finished at 110 and the NSX finished at like 120. And it was bananas because it's like this. It's a similar kind of thing to the Corolla where they're not that available. And I think the Corolla market's got even further way to go because the supply and demand thing is really unbalanced. Like I don't see a lot of decent Corollas come up for sale. It happens, but it's not that common. And it's kind of like the Land Cruiser market. I'm also like super into Land Cruisers, and you'll see a lot of beat up trucks or like super modified trucks. But when one with fairly low miles, which is a very unLand Cruiser, attribute, and is in decent shape comes up, they get crazy prices and people are paying them just because there's not that many available. And the Corolla market just seems to be super sparse. So I foresee it still going. What's your take on it? Where do you think the market's going on these days?
The podcast I did with Seb from Modify Up, he said something that really made me think, was that he doesn't see this upwards price trend ever stopping because they're not making any more of these cars. And like you said, the few we have left that we see for sale are really not the best examples. And you're absolutely right. Like the good ones are all like privately trade hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, a common question I get from people is like, where can I find a clean Corolla? And that's not an easy answer, right? Because besides all the other stuff, like what's your definition of clean? What do you want to use the car for? It's like
Sure.
you're not gonna find it on the open market, man. You gotta like know a few people or like actually get into a community to really find, quote unquote, your ideal Corolla.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, just recently, a friend of mine that I made on the Land Cruiser side of things messaged me, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think this is worth?" And actually, I'm curious. I won't change it. I'm going to explain the car to you,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm curious what you would say sell prices on this. Like what you would recommend somebody pays, not necessarily what you pay. Zenki hatchback, decent paint, then repainted to black. I don't know what color it was originally. Original GTS, rebuilt 16 valve, recently rebuilt. No rebuild on the T50. Mostly complete interior. Whack fiberglass bumpers, but includes the GTS bumpers on the side. Runs and drives. What would you say it should go for?
Well,
Mileage is like 210 or
GTS,
something.
what's it called? GTS hatchbacks almost seal the deal right there. So,
It doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
I know.
Yeah, GTS hatchback is almost like a, open checkbook right there.
It is, dude. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But what would you pin that one at? Not seeing the car. I know
Yeah.
it's a hard game to play. You're doing a pin and tail on donkey.
Dude, I'm gonna shoot high, like 20 or 25.
Yeah, I'd say so too.
Yeah.
I definitely. That's about where I was, which is it feels crazy.
Yeah.
Even without the bumpers on it, yeah, you're going to be another couple grand deep in those if you get a nice set. Just nuts.
Yeah. And it's funny, we have an intern that works here who's also interested in getting his first Corolla. And we saw one locally for around 17. And then I kind of just joked with him, like, hey, for a little bit more, you can actually buy a pretty new CTR, right? And he thought about it. He was like, oh, man. Oh, yeah.
It is. That's pretty profound though. The Corollas are leaning deeper into the craziness of what they are. If you're going to justify the wild prices getting more wild, but it happened with that Porsche market too. I think you do some stuff with 911s here and there. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so I'm not too deep in it. A lot of what I hear is from because I'm a fan of Matt Farah and the Smoking Tire, so I
Mhm.
know he's mentioned before like back in the day those were like undesirable cars. The janitor had one, right? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden certain things including like in pop culture happened that the cars blew up in price just like we're seeing with Corollas right now.
Yeah, a friend of mine went through, had found an old auto trader in, his back office, and it was from when he was selling his old S13. This must have been 15 years ago or something like that. Back when you would actually put an ad in Auto Trader and see it in print. And it had a 72 911, and it said, it needs some mechanical help. It runs and drives you, drive it home, no big deal, stops brakes, but could use some TLC. And the price on it was 5 grand. I was like, just imagine that market of hopping in on those, what's happened over the next 10 years, 15 years. I think they've leveled out a little bit, but it's pretty insane how they've gone. And Corollas are on their way there for sure.
Yeah, it's a tough call though because just like the Corolla market, I think in Porsche no one saw it coming.
Yeah, I think they weren't. We didn't see that going as nuts as it went. And that's I think part of the reason why it feels almost wasteful in a way. Like even though I don't plan on selling the Corolla, it feels almost wasteful to be like, I'm gonna chop it up, pull everything out, put it in a cage, put fiberglass crap all over it. Like it just kind of is gonna make your job so much harder later if you ever want to turn it into something that feels like presentable.
Mm.
Like imagine the prices of parts now and how hard it is to piece together an interior compared to like 10 years from now. It's gonna be crazy. But you know what? I'm gonna stop myself right there because that company that's selling reproduction Zenki bumpers, like that's fairly promising. It's out of OEM like materials. I imagine someday someone will be 3D printing and or reproducing the plastic interior bits. I hope someone's on it. I hope John Russikoff's gonna do it or some shit like that. So it might be possible, but I think that the true OEM is always gonna get that little extra nod.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of AE86 Preservation Society yet.
Yeah, that's a dude that did like hasn't he been working on a seat for like 15 years, like locked away in a dungeon somewhere?
That's pretty accurate actually. So yeah, he is selling full reproduction interior kits at the moment, which absolutely cannot believe because he's got like, at least 5 different color options. And I remember having a conversation with like, man, that's a ton of inventory you have for these
Yeah,
like ultra niche cars, man.
seriously. I remember seeing him like over the years, like comparing 10 different fabric samples to get like the perfect match to, the nutsack area on a stock GTS seat or whatever. And I was just impressed. It's so not my personality, and I just so appreciate when people like that exist because they make it better for all of us.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
definitely. Of course. On that note too, so we've talked about it a little bit already, but the res more than the resurgence, but lately the AE86 Corolla has experienced a huge boom in pop culture right now, like way more than before, where it's become in the mainstream. And
hmm
I know, just casually looking at your Instagram, you do have some strong opinions about mainstream car culture. So, how do you feel about Corollas as they're, in the limelight these days?
I'll say like the most annoying thing about owning a Corolla is that, like, let's say you posted a picture up on some sort of public platform, I don't know, Reddit or some shit like that. You're just never going to be able to get away from the damn gif of Takumi doing like a heel to toe with his damn New Balance shoes and all the tofu shop references. It's just sort of like it feels so, I don't know. And I don't even mind it. Like there's a copy of an Initial D comic book on the back of my toilet. Like it's fun to read. It's cool. But it's sort of like it feels silly because there's so much more to what's going on in these cars than that cartoon. Um, and you get, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to say it nicely because I really like to be nice, but you get sort of um, really new people that can kind of be annoying come in off of just like, I want to be like the cartoon. And that can always be troubling. So I always try to remember, like, I was 17 once. I had an illustrious career on 4AG, getting flamed by Al Ligura, the infamous Treno coupe. And I went through that learning stage too. So like, try and be nice and reach out and explain things. But I think the more that we have Corollas getting into pop culture and getting into like the car limelight, the more we're going to start to see. How do I say this? The more we're just going to have to deal with like weird annoyances and folks who might not be super authentic coming into it.
Okay.
Usually for me, that means like a dude that's got leather perforated driving gloves. Like I don't like those guys.
Oh,
Like,
man.
I mean, like if you pull up in an M4 and he has a leather driving gloves, I probably don't want to talk about cars with you, but I'd love to talk for hours with anybody else about cars. It's just
Mm.
sort of there's a certain type that's got kind of like a weird snootiness to him, and I hope that we're able to maintain our own brand of snobby with Corollas rather than like the way it went with Porsche, which makes sense. It's a fancy car. Porsche is like a nameplate that is associated with that. I'd be bummed if Corollas went that way and it was only a thing for, affluent folks to enjoy. I love that it's still accessible.
The last conversation I had with Takayuno, he explained the real world merits of initial D driving.
Tell me what that is. I'm curious.
So the gutter drop, he said at Willows, I think that's where he holds Drift School USA. There's a place on Willows where you can do a gutter drop. It'll bang up your car, but it works.
It's I think what he's talking about, I might be wrong about this, but there's one there too. You might need a realignment after. Upon if you're doing counterclockwise exiting the skid pad, there's a spot there where you can keep up a lot of momentum and cut off some time. I think it might be the spot he's talking about. Well known for keeping our momentum up in our slow cars.
Yeah. He gave a few other examples, but I just remember the end of the conversation. He was like, "See, initial D is real." And I was like, "Oh man, all right."
Exactly.
If Takayuno says it, then I'll believe it, man.
Exactly. He could lie to me about anything and I'd probably go along with it. It's cool having characters like Taka in Corollas. I don't know how much he hangs around drift events. I just haven't been anything in a while. I think it's cool he still does the drift school. and that's the same crew from forever ago, like Naoki and Yoshie and Taka. But I feel like there were such more interesting characters surrounding Corollas than there were other drift cars way back when.
Mm.
Like, do you know Alex Pfeiffer?
Of course, yeah,
Dude,
yeah. Alex is in our backyard in NorCal, so
he's in there just fucking smoking cigarettes and throwing back Keystones or whatever. Alex was always a huge level setter because he would be real with everybody. He's back in the day he was the judge for every amateur drift competition. And he'd kind of have like a cigarette hanging out of his mouth as if it's not going to stay on there, and magically it's like glued to his lip. And he would be like, if I could enter faster with my Corolla than you can with your stupid S13 with an RB25, you're getting a 0. And I was just like, yeah, this guy's a fucking man. Like, just kind of calling everyone on their shit and checking egos. And what was so cool about having guys like Taka and Alex around is that you could have them hop in your car and they would just go shred no matter how big of a piece of shit your car was, because they were so talented. Like, they came from that Corolla lineage of doing more with less. And I remember Alex hopped in my stock motor iBox Springs A86, and this is how cool I was. I had iBox Springs for suspension, stock diff, stock motor, but I had fender flares. Like, that was a good idea to me way back when. So I had flares I got from Rhett Del Rosario, like from the Philippines, like way back when. Cut the fenders and put those on there and ran Buddy Club P1s and spacers. Felt like I'm the coolest dude in the world. And, you go out and try and link up a course and couldn't quite do it. And then a guy like Alex hops in and just goes and wrecks it and does it buttery too. And all of a sudden, all the excuses that you had as a driver would fall away.
mm.
And that was something that was so cool about guys like that, is you could be the kind of guy who says, oh, I need more power to do this. I need coilers to do this. I need a two-way diff to do this. Or you could just step your game up and get the talent that someone like Alex has. And he's a humble and funny. Like, I don't want him to hear this because he'd like, stop talking about me, But he would hop in and basically be like, dude, that's how it's done. Level yourself up. Stop worrying about leveling your car up. That felt like such a valuable lesson, like not only with cars, but with life. And just like, dude, pull your weight a little harder. Stop making excuses and make it happen. Because if he could do it, it's physically possible for the car to do it. Stop blaming the car. That was like very meaningful for me in the early days.
Yeah, we had such a cool and like legendary cast of people in the Corolla community back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've mentioned a lot of them now: Ueo, Taka, Alex,
Moto, of course.
Yeah, Moto. And working with both Annex and Battle Garage, we talk about it now, in our like marketing meetings, that today, we don't have those like figures in the Corolla community. And in fact, like, a lot of the figures that you and I look up to, a lot of the newer generation have no idea who these people are.
Yeah, it's a bummer. It's sort of gone the way of YouTube, which has been something that's kind of rough. Like, in some ways, I really wish that YouTube was merit-based instead of like, are you wearing jogger pants and you have a DSLR and you're yelling at the camera based. It's like, I learned a lot from Moto in just growing up and being an adult. Like, that guy took time to talk to me on AIM back in the day.
Wow.
And it was like, I was 17, 18 years old and just being a little shit on the forums. And he took the time to be patient and talk me through stuff. And I grew up a lot. And like I mentioned, Al back in the day, like, you have to know him being from NorCal, is like, he was the best troll on the planet. Like, nobody trolled like Al did back in the day. And these people that you talked with and met with, and they really helped you kind of grow up and cared about you, but they also had this insane knowledge. Like, if it weren't for Taka and Hiro and Moto and Naoki, like just that cast alone, like, how much of this Corolla knowledge would have made it to all the little seeds that were planted all around the world. I mean, I've still even referenced some stuff that was up in like the archives on Club 40G or Hachiroku.net or whatever. And it's all because, there were people who had a passion for this and were generous enough to share that knowledge. And we were super lucky for that. That's part of what bums me out about current car culture, is you get like YouTubers who don't really know what they're doing, but they have massive influence. And back in the day, influence used to be something that you really earned. And they like, the YouTubers earned it in their own way because they're putting in work. I'm not saying they're all shit. And really, honestly, in the past couple of years, a lot of the popular ones have gotten a lot better with this. I think because they're surrounding themselves with people who know stuff well. But it's so different than when we came into it, having somebody with a background like Taka,
Mm.
to lean on and to look up to and to guide you on what you should be doing, or an attitude like Alex of shut up and make it happen. Instead, it's sort of like this weird glamorous thing about showing off how hard you can hit your car on the wall or whatever, or
Mm.
get stuck on speed bumps, and it just feels a lot more hollow to me, which bums me out. Like it makes me want to create content, but I just feel like it's not the kind of thing I have enough time to dedicate to, or even have as much important to say as someone like Taka or Alex would have to say to be teaching young kids. It's I don't know, it's a weird thing to grapple with. The times they are a changing.
Yeah, that's one thing that I not really fighting with, but I don't like about, after the death of where we are now, the death of forums, that,
Mm-hmm.
all this content out there is not only so quick, but there's no real long-term value in it.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned some, big names that contributed to the community, for me, Assassin 10,000
Yeah.
and Assassin, because he made like 30 really well done write-ups and put them on every single, Corolla and Toyota forum back in the day. So, everyone,
Totally.
that's one of those guys, like long-term value. 20 years later, we're still looking at his write-ups, right?
Yeah. It's really meaningful that those guys did that. I think a lot of times they don't even have a full awareness of the positive impact that they've had on, this hobby that we all have. And I'm really glad they're there. Forums in their own way. Like I mean, I'm still an active member of one, almost dead, but I still love it, forum called ziptide.com. And now it's just a tiny community of a handful of guys that like to update their little projects here and there. But part of what I think is adding fuel to the fire of the shit show that tends to go on sometimes with modern car culture is that forums sort of forced you to have to go through that hazing process where everyone's like, use the search dipshit, and doing all that annoying stuff.
Mm-mm.
As where Facebook, it's just gone in an instant. And even if somebody posted something really valuable to Facebook, like let's say one of those assassin write-ups was posted to Facebook, it's gone in a day,
Yep.
and it's replaced with somebody asking like which coilovers can go lower, or this or that, and it's like, God damn, this is stupid. Like, and it's just filled with that shit. It's just so disappointing because it feels like Facebook isn't helping anybody necessarily get much better at this in a meaningful way, as opposed to the forums you had your stickies that were meaningful, and you also had your key members that when they talked, you kind of listened because they had earned that respect amongst the community, and it was in a somewhat of a quantifiable way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say the world's going to shit or anything. It's not. I mean, there's still great people around, and I still love hanging with all the Corolla dudes. But I think it makes it a harder process to get to that next level if you're a new guy coming in without that sort of tribe of a forum to help get you in check and give you the right info.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's a really bleak future because I'm thinking like if you're brand new to it, like don't know anyone, don't know really about the car, just know like I really like this chassis. You
Mm-hmm.
spend 5 figures for a chassis that still needs work and a lot of work, no matter what chassis you buy. And
Yeah.
then once you actually have it and you need help, well, how do you find the help? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say there has been the bummer is that the view count doesn't reflect the quality, but there's been some kick-ass stuff on YouTube. There's a few guys that, I'll have some problem with the Corolla and punch it into YouTube, and there's some guys that'll do like the equivalent of a build thread, but in video format. And have you done some YouTube stuff too?
Yeah. Yes.
I knew you were familiar. I must have seen a couple of your videos, and I probably even left a comment in thanks, because usually I do when somebody puts up some killer content. And you being more technically talented is so meaningful to somebody that has the car. And I think a lot of the other guys that are just pumping and dumping content, they're just not providing that value. It's just sort of, they build an army of 14-year-olds who are willing to buy t-shirts and skate decks from them or whatever. Yeah.
Dude, you know what? It's tough because we're, of the similar camp where the content I put out more than, how many people listen to it. Like I want this all, to provide long-term value just like those before me did it. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that doesn't net me, probably what a business wants, right? Like a large volume of viewers or a large volume of attention.
Yeah.
And I've people who have been like mentors to me, or even like the younger interns in the office tell me like, your style is very different, but it's not going to be very popular for like a broader audience, which is like a tough struggle. So I get the clickbait stuff, I get the
Yeah.
clickbait stuff, but it's just tough for me that like it's shiny and bright for an instant, and then people are gonna forget about it. And you keep making this like these like short term pieces, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't know where it puts things, because it's so like what you've done with some of the tech stuff is so important. Um, and maybe things play their different roles. The way that I've kind of seen some of the content creation is most people, and I don't know where this puts like Corolla people in 10 years, but like most people want that quick hit of adrenaline of somebody yelling at them doing a burnout, and then like it's done or whatever, right? But folks who are going to be actually putting the time in on their cars, I think you're going to build a much stronger relationship with that audience. So like when you put up your videos and you're responding to comments of somebody that might run into an issue, I think that creates a much deeper and more meaningful connection with a smaller audience,
Mm.
which to me feels like it's a little less glamorous and definitely less profitable in the short run, but in the long run, it gives you meaningful a more meaningful community that you probably have like a more meaningful influence over. And I don't mean influence like a weird way. I mean it in that like you have a better connection with them.
Hmm.
So say thank you for doing it. You're a positive impact on the community, and that's fantastic, man.
Well, I sincerely appreciate it, but I mean, I'll be completely honest. Like, I want that million views. I want that YouTube money too, man. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie.
No, and isn't that the dream to like, be able to do what we like doing, and then, you get paid for it. But it's like the question becomes, at what point are you willing to like sell your soul, get a pair of joggers, get really puffy hair on the top, and like become like the YouTube guy? I don't know, man. It's a strange conundrum, because it's like how much of your soul are you willing to sell for it? Some technical channels do kick ass. I don't know.
Yeah, I think those what you mentioned, the technical channels that provide long-term value. I think those are really the ones to watch. Is like who's providing good content with long-term value that it's helping people or helping a community, and they're also doing well on YouTube. I think those are the ones to really watch out for, or like to learn from. Like, what are they doing that's they can provide value, be true to
Mhm.
themselves, and still be popular. What are they doing?
Yeah. It makes me wonder what's going to happen to some of those like middle level YouTube dudes that are kind of following the fuckboy formula, but not quite hitting like the full mega status. They just disappear. I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't understand it. It's like I've sort of recognized that I'm too old to fully understand how it works, and I'm not willing to dig into some of the YouTube weirdness. You know what I mean? Like some are, it's sort of like I respect your craft. You've built up something pretty impressive. Like you're those big guys, but Pandora's boxing for me. So I just kind of hang out in my garage, just do stuff here and there for fun.
Well, we're getting pretty close to that 1 hour mark, and I want you to have the opportunity to shout out what you're doing also. So, one thing I saw is the Cool Guy Club. What is the Cool Guy
And
Club?
that, oh man, that's about as professional as a podcast gets. Me and two other buddies get together once every 7 months and record a half hour of crappy audio. It's kind of our excuse to get together and joke around. So with my buddies Mike and George, who I met when I worked at a hellhole called Stillin that sells Z parts, and we kind of became lifelong friends. And they both crack me up. Like George's got references that always get me laughing, and Mike is probably the funniest guy I've ever met. So getting to sit together with those guys for an hour and joke around about cars and hear what terribly wrong predictions Mike makes about the future is always a good time. So, I mean, if anybody wants to check that out, that's fun. Just search Cool Guy Club on Spotify or iTunes or whatever, and you'll be able to find it. And there's a few up there. Just hang with us with the bad audio, but it's a good time.
And then the bombshell at the beginning was that you sold Big Country Labs. I really wanted to talk about that one.
Yeah, so that I started with my buddy Darren many years ago. 9 years ago. I don't know. I'm bad with timelines. It was a long time ago. And then Darren, he lived in SoCal for a while and then kind of lost interest in doing the car stuff. So I bought him out of the company and operated it solo for a while. And then I took on another partner named Rory. He was an Australian fella, so he has a cool accent and stuff, and great hair. And then we built up the company to be what it is. And we're just about to launch that new 8086 coupe wing that I love. And I think that actually might be out and available right now. I would check it out if I was you guys. That's a fun project to work on. But I sort of got to a stage where I was working a ton and I had a little one at home and wanted to focus on sort of more me time. And it was a great run and was really proud of what I was able to make out of the company. And I said, what, time to take some me time, enjoy myself in the garage with the cars, enjoy some family time. So I just made a tough decision and my then partner, Rory, bought me out. And I went on my merry way and he just celebrated a birthday and he's got a little one that's growing and having a great time running the company. We kind of finished off with a cool milestone of being in the latest Need for Speed game, which was super awesome. Super proud of that. And yeah, that was it. I don't know. It was all good relationship stuff. There's no issues or anything, but it's sort of my time to go on. And I got, future creative projects I want to mess with. I've always got something up my sleeve that I want to create. So I thought that would be a good opportunity to pursue those. But that's basically the full story there. Nothing too crazy. Just making life shifts.
I was going to mention being a child of the Fast and Furious, two of my favorite things, the biggest freaking wings you can get, and then also the best URL you can get, crunkyourtrunk.com.
Yeah, we really had fun with it over the years. And it started because my buddy Darren and I, he had an S13 at the time, and I had my 11. It was at the time, 4 different colors. And we just loved big wings and we loved what Garage BB made. And we went to see how much they were, and it was going to be like $5,000 to import 2 wings from Japan because nobody sold them here. And we thought, well, screw it. What if we just made our own? And we, drew up, because we're both from a design background, so we kind of drew up how we wanted the brackets to look and in the wing, and worked a lot with Bondo and fiberglass to kind of make it what we wanted it to be. Had our own little innovations in there, and then started to learn how to get into production. It was a huge learning experience. It was really cool. I can't believe how much more I know now than I knew then. But it really came from trying to be cheap about getting a wing, because it was cheaper to just make 2 of our own than it was to import ones from Garage BB. And that sort of came to be the company. The name was from, that song, "In a Big Country Dreams Stay."
No, I don't know that song, but
well, I'm not going to keep singing it. So it's called "In a Big Country," and I think it's the band is Big Country too. But it was featured in this snowboarding video that we like to watch, and we're like, that's cool. We'll call it Big Country Lap. So that sort of became the name, and it always had that song playing in the back of our heads when we were talking about it.
Awesome, man. Well, we are just about at our 1 hour mark, and Colin, I just want to thank you so much again for your time. Like, this was such a enlightening conversation. Like, looking at your YouTube videos, I knew you like to joke and stuff, so I wasn't sure how this was gonna go, but like, man, a lot of like history and a lot of depth in this one, man. So I sincerely appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And it was fun talking to you. And I'm leaving a lot of comments on your YouTube videos. I hope Google, anytime there's an ad on one of your YouTube videos, I'm going to click it 6 times.
Oh, appreciate it, man.
I'm going to get you paid.
Appreciate it. Much appreciated. Before we go, would you like to shout out your social? Is there anything else you wanted to shout out?
Sure. I mean, if anybody wants to check out the projects I've talked about, the Instagram is just CFROST, CFrost. Easy as that.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to shoot you a message after this because I feel like there's some key players that you can get a hold of that I'd love to also have on the podcast. I mean, give you an example. Like, I've been trying to get Battle Version Alex on the podcast forever because I'm a huge fanboy. I still got Battle Version parts on my car, and
that's the best stuff, man.
Yeah. No, I 1000% agree. So yeah, man, I'm gonna shoot you a message about some potential guests. Hopefully, you can get us linked up so we can hear them school me on the podcast. So
yeah, for sure, I'll do my best. You might have to dig Alex out of a hole in the forest, but I'll do my best for you.
Awesome. That's it for this week's episode. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, as reviews really help support us. You can do it straight from your desktop. Don't even need an Apple device. This is Autohaus Z. Thanks for all the support, you guys.